Welcome, everybody. My name is Remy Ortega. I'm the director of the McGuire Center for Entrepreneurship. And I was thinking back to when this partnership first started. And it started with a guy here who's in the Impact Hub. His name is Scott Nance, who's an alumni of the University of Arizona. And we had an alumni event in Two Embarcadero Center. And he was at the event, and we kind of hit it off. And we said, hey, let's continue discussing what things are possible. And then he said, I want to introduce you to Tim, my boss. He's a great guy in the social impact space. And it'd be really nice for the two of you to connect. So a few months later, in June of last year, we sat right over there, Tim, myself. Right yeah, right there, Tim, myself, and Scott and Elizabeth, who was our development person at the time. And we just started to talk about what you could potentially do in terms of a collaboration, not really having any idea what to do, but we liked each other, and we knew if it was possible, we'd like to do something with that. And so from that came the idea about doing this hybrid satellite campus with the Impact Hub, this partnership to deliver entrepreneurship education here in San Francisco. And that idea had come from we're doing similar partnerships globally in South America and overseas. So I thought, well, the overseas one sounds interesting. So when I mentioned to Tim about this idea about some sort of partnership, some way of delivering entrepreneurship education in the area, especially focused around social, Tim loved it, but he said, listen, I don't like to wait around too long, so if this is going to be real, let's move forward. If not, we'll figure out something else to do. And 9 months later, we're here having the launch event, so I think we did pretty well with that in terms of timing. And so I remember sending a comment out to Tim regarding the agreement, and 10 seconds later, I get comments back. And I'm like, okay, this is going to go pretty fast. So it's worked out pretty well, and I'm really thrilled to be here. But it really is Tim and Scott Nance and our dean, Paul Goyes. For those of you who don't know him, he's a real visionary at the business school. He's given me the freedom to do a lot of different things around entrepreneurship. He's a big believer in it. And for anybody who's worked in higher ed, you know that if the dean wasn't supportive, wasn't empowering, nothing like this would ever take place. So I'd like to bring Tim on here, and he'll get us going for the day. But thank you.
Hey, thanks, Remy. Rooted in place. Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't that long ago, and I remember thinking, oh, another one of these universities that wants to come up with crazy ideas and then not do them. Because I've been around the block a few times, and we're going to be talking the panel, so I'm not going to go into much background, but that was my takeaway was sort of the same thing, which is after hitting our heads against the wall in various ways, shapes, and forms with universities, with the Impact Hub in San Francisco, and we've had some great partnerships sort of in small anecdotes, short-term initiatives, so I don't want to diss them too much, but like the kind of level of affirmative agency and quickness that UA approached this partnership, and we will talk about it some more in the panel, was really refreshing, and we're like, oh wow, this really is going to happen, I think, and it happened in the matter of 90, 120, 180 days, not 3 months, and then you wait for somebody to finally get in front of the provost and then get it shot down. So I'm really excited by this partnership, and I mean, you're sitting in place, and I think this partnership is very much about place, but Impact Hub is a global network of about 100 of these physical locations. This one's on the larger side of things, in a larger market for entrepreneurism, I'd say, on the spectrum, but they're across 30 countries, 30 cities, actually probably 25 cities, there's 3 in London, but literally hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs and investors and philanthropists, all with kind of a common affinity around people and ideas and capital that are to make the world a better place. So social innovation, you can call it social entrepreneurship, but that's sort of the glue that holds this place together. And I think it's a great place to experiment with the next generation of curriculum and programs from in higher ed and in entrepreneur programs, because this is kind of cutting edge. It's if you ask 9 out of 10, well, actually, if you ask 10 millennials, 9 out of 10 of them will say business should have purpose and should integrate values. These are national surveys. Like 9 out of 10, not 2 out of 10. I mean, I'm Gen X, and it's like people are, what? I mean, yeah, you give away some philanthropy later, but the consumers, the workforce, what is it, already a third of the workforce is millennials? It's going to be a half in like the next 5 years. That's like sweeping tectonically the whole of the United States. That kind of integration of value and values into vocation and work, and it's not just where you work, it's the brands you want to buy from and interact with. It is actually the definition of brand, all that stuff. So, that's kind of what this place is about, and there's, I think, 400 members already here who are doing entrepreneurial activities, and the sort of hypothesis here is, like, let's activate physical community and place along with the acquisition of skill and excellence in the pursuit of entrepreneurial efforts, and bring them together, and that's what this is. So welcome to the Impact Hub in San Francisco, and happy to answer questions during the cocktail hour on it if we don't get to them in the panel, but thanks for your partnership. Oh, and then what happens? And I guess we're gonna dive right in, and I'm gonna introduce Sarah Olson. We all decided that we would share out the responsibility of saying a bit about ourselves the first time we talk. But Sarah is a longtime Hub member, actually, and innovator in social impact metrics and kind of tracking, and has worked with CalSTRS and CalPERS, I think, both of them at times, and foundations and impact investment funds and operating companies in the space. So she's agreed to come on and sort of frame the panel and help moderate it and keep us all civil in case the claws come out and we start attacking each other, which I doubt, but you never know. So Sarah Olson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I won't take up very much time because we have a very juicy panel here. It's great to have you all here. I think this is one of the most innovative partnerships I have heard of in this domain, because Arizona is sort of in the middle of the country, as far as anyone out here might know, and there's so much happening there that I think people don't necessarily know about. And at the same time, there's a lot of energy here that can be vital to bring to places that aren't right on the coasts. So we have a really exciting panel, and I'm going to just get right to it. So I'd like to ask the panelists to please come up. We've got Paulo Goes, the Dean of the Eller College of Management at the University of Arizona, Matt Van Horn, the CEO and co-founder of June Oven, and Michelle Vaughn, team manager at Andela. So please take your seats here. And I've got a timer. Well, perhaps so, yes. You're coming up here too, right? Yeah. So I'd like you guys to start by talking about what your definition of entrepreneurship is and how you see your own work filling a need in the world as it looks to entrepreneurship to provide solutions to the many problems facing us worldwide. So I'd like to start with you, Paulo, if you would. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. This is a great turnout. Just show of hands, how many of you have been associated with the University of Arizona? All right, so alums of the Eller College or the previous BPA, yep. Alums of the Entrepreneurship McGuire Center. Okay, so I guess we're supposed to say a few words about ourselves just to get started. So yes. I'm Paulo Góes, I'm the Dean of the Eller College. Next week, I'll complete my second anniversary of being dean. Prior to that, I spent 8 years being head of the MIS department. As you can gather from my accent, I got that because I went to the University of Rochester in New York. but before that, I grew up in Brazil. I have a degree in engineering. My family are all entrepreneurs. And I think because I have the engineering background, I like to think as an entrepreneur, like to build stuff and find solutions for problems. But I went to my PhD in the business school. I fell in love with information systems and decided that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Became an academic, taught a lot, researched 10 years ago, came to the U of A, and here I am starting this great program. That's the exciting thing about being at the U of A. We are in the middle of the country, but I think we all think about ourselves as aligned with the West Coast. Most of our students, 60% of our undergraduates come from California or come from our state, many of them from California, and then they go back, they come back to California. So we like to align ourselves with the high-tech industry. If you look at the college, the main strength of the college, one is the entrepreneurship program, McGuire, the other one is the MIS department. And that's a very powerful combination for what we need in today's world, the digital transformation, digital everything. So when I became dean, my strategy was to leverage our strength and look at forming the next generation of business leaders who really understand the digital world and who are really motivated to do things. So entrepreneurship the McGuire Center became an essential pillar of that strategy. And as you know, the McGuire Center was created in 1984, so 34 years ago. It was, I believe, the first, or one of the very first entrepreneurship programs among business schools in the country. And it was funded by Eller, who then later became the major benefactor for the Eller College. And I just want to read a little thing that Carl wrote when he committed to create the fund. He said, there is growing need in this country, back in 1983, for trained entrepreneurial talent. Too often the academic focus of business schools is aimed solely at preparing graduates to manage within large corporations. So he realized that much before everybody else. So if now 9 out of 10 millennials who want to do something that has an impact, a social impact, I would say that same number, they want to be doers and they want to be creative and they want to make an impact. So we were a pioneer in entrepreneurship education, but that positions us very well for doing something like this. So I'm very excited with the possibility, and I know there will be other questions about entrepreneurship education and so on, so I'll just stop here.
Well, thank you so much, Paulo, and it's, I think, a real testament to the fact that you guys live entrepreneurship in how entrepreneurially you were able to put this program together. It's no small feat that an academic institution has been able to go from concept to implementation in the span of time that you have. So it's exciting. Tim, would you like to take us also into your definition of entrepreneurship and how it's reflected in your current work?
Great, which started 20 years, 7 months ago. I was just thinking about it. I was like, wow, there actually really weren't any millennials. Almost, they were very small. They were in high school or not even. When I started at Calvert, which is a sort of socially responsible investment mutual fund group out of Bethesda and DC area. That's Bethesda, Maryland, in 1997, and there was no social entrepreneurship. There was no impact investing, and nobody was talking about the largest wealth transference in history, which is, to millennials and women actually, of the $50 trillion variety that's going on right now in the next 15 years. In addition, so that's the other thing I didn't say. It's like what are the consumption patterns, and what are the investing patterns too of what people think about, and as in addition to what vocation do they want, or what is their definition of vocation or entrepreneurship in this case. I mean, I think it's evolved. There was no co-working, there were no impact hubs 20 years ago, much less 10 years ago either. It's a relatively new phenomenon, but I do think that I kind of stole my own thunder with that 9 out of 10 thing, but that, you know, I don't think you're going to get away with in an MBA program or any kind of business approach and definitional activity, whether it be in a university setting or anywhere, a conference, etc., any longer. I mean, the writing's on the wall. It's either the only people who aren't are dinosaurs at this point, who aren't integrating value and values into the definition. I mean, the guy, what's his name, Fink, the head of BlackRock, a couple months ago, like sent out his letter to every CEO in the country saying, if you don't integrate values into your P&L and your balance sheet and your business, and you don't have an impact strategy that you can articulate to us like ASAP, we're not going to invest in you anymore. I mean, whether or not that's, you know, really got teeth or he really means it, or the fact that that's even being published in the Wall Street Journal by the CEO of the largest asset manager in the world, with multiple trillions of dollars, I don't even know how big they are, is crazy. And I think that, you know, if you ask not just members of this place, but if you go around and talk to businesses, you know, startups, people who are trying to do that, I mean, that it comes out really quickly. It's like, we want to create a culture of purpose. We want to be about more than our supply chain. We want to, you know, it's like we want to have a relationship with our customers that is actually authentic brand this, authentic brand that. I mean, it's like, it's changed, and it hasn't kind of caught up in the total mainstream conventional wisdom yet. Like, we haven't articulated it as a culture, but that's just because that always follows usually, right? Unless you're doing some kind of Trotsky-esque Marxist revolution thing where you actually get out ahead of it. But even that was really following, you know, the incredible social inequities that were going on with a bunch of oligarchs or you know, ruling class. But I mean, I guess that's my answer is that the integration of values into the definition of what value is that you create as an entrepreneur is like the train has left the station, and now we just have to figure out how to teach it and how to make it excellent and rigorous and track it and measure against it and really monetize. I mean, to be blunt, monetize it both on and off balance sheet. You know, monetize it for all the good and also just the dollar signs of it too, and really make that like, you be the brand of choice, be the product and service of choice, because you've done a better job integrating values into what your value proposition is to your customers. That's what we're trying to figure out, but that's what's going on right now.
Very eloquent, thank you. So integrating values, social and environmental values, into the value proposition of a business is how you define entrepreneurship. Let's turn to you, Matt, and ask, what is your definition of entrepreneurship, and how is that manifesting in the work that you are doing?
Sure. My name's Matt. So right out of college, my best friend and I started a transportation company. That company was called Zimride. That company is now Lyft today. And then we couldn't actually raise any money back then. So I went and said, okay, I need to go learn from other entrepreneurs, and spent 6 years across 2 companies learning from other brilliant entrepreneurs. My best friend Logan is still CEO of Lyft. And before starting my current venture called June, and we've raised over $30 million for June. And we are an AI appliance company, and our first product is an intelligent oven that will cook food perfectly for you every single time. And I think, you know, kind of my definition of entrepreneurship, obviously it's about starting things, but my slant on that has kind of been going through walls to start things and will things into existence. I can give an example of, so I really wanted to...
You're not talking about the car going through a wall, are you?
We're not talking about cars, no. Solving problems by willing things into existence. So, I really wanted to start companies. I knew that in high school. I remember I visited U of A and met with the dean at the time, Mark Zupan, and I was like, "Hi, can you pre-accept me to the entrepreneurship program?" And he's like, "What? You're a high school kid. Like, come back in 4 years." And I did, and I didn't get in. I actually didn't get into the entrepreneurship program, even though I was in Eller already. And 2 of my friends did. So what did I do? I went to orientation and just showed up, and wasn't going to take no for an answer. And we formed teams that day. the MIS, there was one MIS student. I made sure he was on my team immediately. Engineers are very important to the ecosystem of starting anything. And there was one engineer in the entire entrepreneurship program at that time, which is changing. We were just talking about that, which is awesome. And they let me in, which was very nice. And so I think I've taken a very similar approach. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails miserably, to will things into existence. And in the early days of Zimride, we couldn't raise any money. No one took us seriously. And so for me, it's like, okay, I am not ready to start a company right now. And so it took years of learning from other entrepreneurs before venturing off into our own to start this crazy AI appliance company.
Well, what a great story. Maybe you can hold on to the idea for a later part of our discussion about how you can teach people about that kind of will to succeed, and how did you learn from those entrepreneurs? Michelle, let's hear from you. What is your definition of entrepreneurship? Is it the same as what we've been hearing? Is it something different? And how is that part of the work you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, so just a little background. I just learned a fun fact that connects us both. I also did not get into the entrepreneurship program the first time. Luckily for me, there was 2 rounds of entrepreneurship. So I got in the second time, but I went to University of Arizona, studied MIS marketing and entrepreneurship. Actually, Paolo was one of my first bosses ever to have, because I worked in the MIS department for a little while. We started so the cool thing about the entrepreneurship programs, you start an actual venture from basically start to finish, and at the end you really have the opportunity to launch it, which some of my fellow colleagues did, or you have the opportunity to kind of just take it as a learning experience. So our venture was called Exploreful, which is essentially TripAdvisor for the millennial generation, because just as they like to have social impact, they also like to travel. So it's getting kind of personalized travel recommendations. We all decided to take more corporate jobs after graduation, so I really took a really hard look about what I wanted to do with my career, and entrepreneurship to me has really been what the program taught me, that every decision you make has impact across just your team. It has impact across finance, across externally, internally, across engineering, across marketing, and every decision you make needs to cross-function. And entrepreneurship to me is starting up that idea, whether it be for a whole company or within a big organization, from start to finish as well. So I decided to work for the most non-entrepreneurship company in the world, which was IBM. So I worked for IBM for 4 years, but they're starting to do a lot of really interesting things in the startup space as well. So I worked for IBM for 4 years and really enjoyed connecting with different types of partners, managed a couple accounts in their software space. And then I found Andela, and that's where I'm at now. So Andela, in short, is we are changing the way companies are hiring talented software developers. And we're doing this by connecting the dots to the most talented software developers in Africa, and then we're finding companies around the world who are really looking for software engineers. So at a large scale, we're actually backed by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and also Google Ventures. And we're based in 3 countries in Africa right now, which is Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda. And we've developed a 4-year curriculum post-graduation. The first 6 months are kind of a technical leadership program, but then after that, we are finding companies, so any company who's looking for engineers can be a great partnership for Andela, and we're finding companies for our developers to be full-time integrated team members, but you don't only get the developer, you get the ecosystem of Andela, which we have pre-supported mentorship, we have learning, we have a track to get your developer from a junior developer to a senior developer. So I kind of wanted to go, it's a complex storyline of what Andela does, but it really is important, especially for the sake of this conversation, because the impact we're having is we're connecting the dots for really talented individuals to opportunities they never had. One of our values is that brilliance is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. So we're connecting the dots there. So I currently manage our partner experience team. So as soon as we start a partnership with a certain organization, my team manages that experience of Andela for our developers and our partners.
Fascinating. I mean, I think you can sort of hear that the way you are addressing entrepreneurship isn't taking place in a sort of traditional paradigm where people already have every skill they need and then they just go and work in a company and it sort of just takes care of itself. You're addressing a larger suite of the ecosystem than might have previously been the case. So, if we're talking about entrepreneurship education today, what does that need to look like? And can you talk about some of the results that you've seen, or what about your entrepreneurship education has been most important? And was it in the classroom? Was it a formal part of education, or was it something else? Michelle?
Yeah, I think the whole concept of building something from start to finish for me was the eye-opener I really needed that I couldn't gather from like a lecture. It was, for me, I'm a very experiential person, and that's what the entrepreneurship program did for me, is I actually had to create, instead of looking at people's value statements or their business model, I had to create that with my team. And I had to put these ideas we'd found in a textbook into practice and actually execute it and defend upon that. We did a lot of case competitions, we did a lot of pitch ventures for action, like this is not like a pretend you're in a class and here's your hypothetical company. This was our company we were pitching against, had a real panel of investors that we actually would hope to get funding from at the end. And so that was the great thing, is like no longer is this a theoretical idea, this is actually something you're executing. So when you make those decisions, you start to think of it in a whole different scope. You start to see the financial impact, the market impact. Again, is it executable from a product perspective? Is there demand? What is the supply like? And so that's why I've really gathered from my education there that every decision I help push forward at my company now is going to have impact across the organization at some degree.
Thank you. Matt, could we pick back up on what it is about the education you received, either formally or informally, that you found most useful to your ability to succeed as an entrepreneur, or to fail and get value out of that?
I mean, just the best way to learn is to start, build, and fail. And I did that at the entrepreneurship program. We did not successfully raise money after out of the program, which again was a good lesson in failure. And again, I just couldn't agree more that you learn so much more just by doing things and by trying to motivate people. Like when I was general manager of our team, and again, it's people that, again, everyone wants to like pass the class and all that, but it's hard to motivate people when they're not being paid and you're technically not their boss, but for some reason they elected you general manager of this entrepreneurship team. And so just those learnings of motivating and working together and teamwork and different personalities and finding the right way to solve problems and come together towards a common date, towards a common demo day. We went out to competition and we didn't get first place, we got second, but just that whole experience was really wonderful of actually doing, kind of compared to the other 3 years of my college experience, which were fine, but it was just very different and much more engaging and interesting to me.
So Paolo, what is the right combination, do you think, of formal kind of classroom learning with experience of really doing and trying? And what's the difference between, like, why should someone still get a degree in a world in which trying and doing it and really being in the real world is so valuable?
Well, I represent an academic institution, so I like to think that the degree has value, but this question about can you teach entrepreneurship comes up all the time, right? Can you teach perseverance, what Matt went through? Can you teach that grind through the problems? We have to create environments that the students are going to experience as realistic as possible, those types of situations. Entrepreneurship is about opportunity identification, it's about problem solving, it's about risk management, it's about uncertainty management. How do you teach that? The only way is to create these immersive environments with real world applications and projects and challenges. I talk to Remy a lot, and our focus on the McGuire Center is not necessarily to produce feasible ventures, but it is to produce the entrepreneurial mindset. And by going through those 2 semesters or those experiential programs, the students develop that. And we see that all the time. So, and then because we are a business school, to address all these issues of opportunity identification, risk management. We have to give the students the background in finance, the background in marketing, the background in strategy, the background in digital technologies. So it's a combination of classroom plus the mentoring, the experiential. And the other thing that's very important that Matt mentioned is we realize also over the years that whenever you have interdisciplinary teams, they would really be successful. So we are opening our program now to engineers and scientists and medical doctors, law school students. We are assembling teams that are interdisciplinary in nature, because that diversity of background, that's really magic. And that's what you find in the real world, the understanding that it's not just 5 MBA students working on one idea, but it's bringing together the different perspectives.
Fantastic. Tim, when we talk about entrepreneurship with values, is there something that's not necessarily part of the traditional canon of subjects like marketing, finance, and so on, operations management, human resources, or what do they call it, organizational behavior? Is there something else that needs to be part of the new canon to get it right? Or do you think that it comes about intuitively through doing and just having sort of an invitation to bring values into business?
I think it's the same. I don't think that integrating, I mean, it's really just a sort of extending the spectrum of the toolkit, of like what tools you have in the kit and figuring out how to wield that one to do X or Y. I mean, there's so many things in conventional business that didn't exist 200 years ago or even 20 years ago, right? So you discover this stuff and then you figure out the language and what rigor is and all of that. And I think on the one hand, but you know, it is a little bit, I mean, the nuance is harder to sort of define, track, and teach maybe than tenacity. I think was one of the other, you know, it's like tenacity is like so critical. You know, good ideas and smart people are everywhere, especially around here. Tenacity and going through walls or around them or up over them or digging a hole under them and coming up the other side, a little harder to, you know, to really to find. I think, you know, being able to understand and then commercialize impact, for example, I mean, that's kind of like, what the heck does that mean, right? Well, it means you can monetize it, customers will pay more for it, your employees will stick around longer, and you know, and maybe even work for a little less than they might at your correlative in a non-impactful kind of context. So, I mean, I think you have to pick it apart just like you pick apart anything, and start identifying what the value is, naming it, codifying it, and then building it in a way that you can actually look back at it. I mean, I think that, as you mentioned, Paolo, I mean, the way I translated kind of what you were saying into the environment here, and what I've learned is diversity. Like, there's an incredible strength and resilience in biodiversity. I mean, it's like why we're so freaked out about the environment, you know, the climate change and the extinction patterns that are going on, is that they actually know that, like biological resilience goes way down when diversity goes down. I'd say that, you know, what I've learned about being part of a community here that is pursuing entrepreneurial ventures to make the world better and make some money too, probably, is that it's one of the big strengths is when you can institutionalize diversity, and whether that's, you know, gender diversity. This is a 55% women population who work in this building, for example, or racial diversity, or class diversity, or corporate diversity, nonprofits and for-profits in balance, or stage diversity, not a bunch of everybody doing a startup looking at the same problems with no experience to translate to each other other than what they learned yesterday, or they're going to learn tomorrow, but people who've actually been through it, and having that kind of diversity of stage. Capital diversity, like philanthropy and investment across the spectrum, not just like I want to make more money than you while doing good, but actually I give away some money. I'm willing to do some stuff where I'm making a little less because I'm really conscious of what's being created. So all of these kinds of sectors, I think we really have to, I think that they're really important to creating kind of an impactful environment is pulling that all together.
And do you think that there's a role then for academia in capturing some of that and sort of
because
codifying
it's so
it?
hard, when you're in the thick of it, even if you have some wisdom diversity, right? You've got people who are at different paths along and are coming at it from different angles. You're going to be a lot smarter as a mob, trying to all cacophonously go after creating stuff together, like that's going on around here every day. But that doesn't mean that you're not still in the thick of it. Like people are trying to raise money, they're trying to hire people, they're trying to keep the people that they have, fight over customer, all this stuff, even within a kind of a social entrepreneurship context, no different, right, than the conventional. You don't have that space to, to really go to the woodshed and to really acquire skills and be thoughtful and kind of challenge yourself with what don't I have, what don't I know. Right? It's easy to know what you know and make stuff up, but like to really thoughtfully identify what you don't know and to discern, and to go through a discernment process and acquire skills and learning is something that you have to create a structure and vessels for that. And I think that's where education, and we play around here with light skills acquisition and like workbenches where you can go and acquire this little skill or that skill and kind of piece it together. And that's great too. And that goes in this direction, but it's not the same as folks who, it's just like you can't be good at what you're not good at. You can only be good at so many things, right? And so if what you're trying to do is create this whole on-ramp of acquiring the toolkit and trying it out, and you have to give the space for that. And that's why I think we will continue to have academic structures, and whether or not they're going to change. And I think UA is an example of a forward-looking one that is like, oh wait, we don't all have to be hanging out in Arizona. We can actually go to where the people are and be creative about how do you live and work and go through these programs. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Sure. Yeah. Did anyone want to add anything to that? So let's move into then this partnership between the University of Arizona and the Impact Hub. What can the Bay Area's mission-driven community, who are your prospective students, expect if they gain acceptance into this program? And how will this experience elevate their goals? I'd like to start with you, Paolo, and I don't know if we would like to have any summary of anything from Remy, even about some of the mechanics of how this works, but would you address that?
As an academic institution, we know very well how to have a product called a degree. So that's what we do, right? So we created this master's in entrepreneurship degree that is 10 different courses, core courses and electives, and they cover all the main elements of entrepreneurship education, from economics principles to ethics to marketing to finance, a couple of courses on social entrepreneurship, organization design, so whole variety of courses. We understand also that many students may not want to get the degree because it's 10 credits. The 10 courses, 30 credits. But we can extract three courses at a time and create certificates. And those may be more appealing to different people. Remy, would you like to add to some of the?
Yeah, so one of the things I think is really unique here is that, and I was explaining this earlier, unlike a traditional satellite campus in which a university will set up a facility in some other city from their main campus and deliver education through here, we're really doing it in partnership with the Impact Hub. It's not just we're renting out space and we're going to deliver this. We're both getting together and figuring out how to make the experience, the overall ecosystem and the experience, be as positive as it can be. So leveraging the Impact Hub member network, professional network, capital networks, together with our education and our ability to teach entrepreneurship, you combine all those things together, and then you have something that's really special beyond just a satellite campus. So that's the best term we have for it at the moment, a satellite campus. But based on the other ones that are out there, what's really unique about this is the true partnership in delivering the experience to each individual student and the benefits of both networks coming together.
So how would someone apply?
Okay, so from an application standpoint, it's online. You go through the standard University of Arizona process to apply for the online masters. There's certain prerequisites as Economics 101 and Accounting 101. Just want to make sure people understand some of the basic bookkeeping. But then the coursework is really interesting. It's like I had been an entrepreneur before I tripped into academia, and I had either launched a number of ventures, had one really solid exit, and along different verticals. And I was thinking back to the first couple of ventures I was a part of, and what kind of program would I have thought from the spirit of it would make it exciting, fun, and interesting. And so, like I tell our students nowadays, I say, entrepreneurship is not based on business. Entrepreneurship predates business, right? People came out of the caves into communities and they started figuring out, I'm really good at doing this, and somebody's figured out, oh, well, I'll buy those from you, and then I can produce it and sell it. And then came, as you begin to scale, how do you manage all this, and then comes business. So I wanted to cut across different domains. So we have a course on organizational innovation from agriculture standpoint. And with all the problems that we're facing these days around the world that have to be based on agriculture, I think that that's a great one. The ethics, entrepreneurship, and economy course that's being taught by a department that's #1 in the world in that space. And the book that they had written when I first got to University of Arizona, and I read business books all the time, I couldn't put down the first 3 chapters. It was so interesting to see entrepreneurship spoken from a historical and a values-based perspective that I just never had really seen before in any written book. So I thought that was, that's a really cool thing. And so we do that over and over again. But the application process is going to be just straight through the website and the normal University of Arizona application process.
Great. Thank you so much. I think with that then, it would be nice to hear from you all what your thoughts are on this collaboration, what questions you may have for this panel, for Remy, what ideas you have that they should do. Do you have any offers to make to this incoming cohort of students? So does anyone have any questions or comments?
You can volunteer as mentors.
So with any program like this, any partnership, the key is often getting early traction, getting something going. So is there any special effort right now between the Impact Hub and Eller and McGuire Center to really get something going? Early applicants, early successes, something special, anything happening right away?
So we are working on the recruitment process immediately following this. So we haven't quite hit that stage when you do something in that kind of speed. When you're being entrepreneurial, you leave certain things uncertain. And so, but the recruitment process is going to be a joint effort between both the Impact Hub and the University of Arizona to gather. I'm already in the process of recruiting faculty for the program for next year. We know we're already putting all the content online so the students can access the content online but be taught face-to-face with the faculty here. And we are really concerned about the experience that's gained from it, making sure that the courses are experiential. So you take these knowledge, so the framework I always use is knowledge, skills, and then behaviors, right? And you get your knowledge from lectures, you get skills from projects, but the behaviors, the mindset you get from immersing yourself in something that's actually real. So pure immersion, and that's what Matt spoke to, that's what Michelle spoke to, and that's what all of our graduates speak to, is that immersion. So we're doing the same thing with the master's program, is immersing right after they take these really interesting kind of courses across a wide range, They go into healthcare entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, global social entrepreneurship. But each of those courses, new venture development, each of those courses, they really do go through and launch a venture from it. So.
Given this type of environment, what types of courses do you think would be best suited to teach from this program in this environment?
So I'm not familiar enough with the question with the program to properly answer that. But I think from my experience, where at Eller, we take basic classes from econ to accounting, and then in the entrepreneurship program, kind of very different areas. But I think for me, one of the biggest areas is to learn from other entrepreneurs and hear people talk and hear them speak, and whether it be especially a digital audience where you can watch a video of someone or just even a YouTube clip and things like that, and kind of pointing to certain things. And a lot of people that I respect, that I'm able to watch videos for and learn from, I think kind of pointing to a lot of and hearing people's real world experience can trigger certain things, which can kind of give you different ideas that can help you be successful as an entrepreneur.
Some notable ventures. Yeah.
Notable ventures. Gosh. Well, there was Games That Give, which was acquired wholly by, I can't remember the name of it. It's a big Silicon Valley roll-up company for apps that was basically connecting corporates to cause marketing and made it Scoot Networks, which is the little red scooters you see on every block in the city. That started at the Hub. But first it was outside of Impact Assets, which is my day job, which I didn't actually even talk about, but just kind of grew out of Calvert. There was this one lonely dude, Michael, sitting out in front of us every day, and he was trying to get me at the coffee maker, and he's like, I'm gonna bring these Chinese scooters, they're electric, and it's gonna be kind of like Zipcar for scooters. And I'm like, that's crazy, Michael. I'm like, Michael, that's horrible. Everybody's gonna die, right? Because I'm an ex-motorcycle rider that I had to get rid of my motorcycle when I had my kids. And I'm like, oh, nobody's gonna have. Everybody's gonna. There has been a bit of road rash associated, but it's an awesome company, and they're and that is grown, and that one's done really. Job Rooster is another one that got acquired, not by Monster.com, but by something like Monster.com, which was connecting day laborers and sort of folks who don't have access to computers but mobile phones into employment and in graduated employment in corporate recruiting. That was wholly acquired. So there's been there's been some really great, Change.org, which I think is going through a comeuppance of trying to figure out where it's going in its business model, but it didn't start at the Hub, but it was for people at the Hub. So, and that's also a for-profit. So there's, a lot of folks have sort of grown up over the last 6 years here, although this is a new building. We used to be down towards Soma a little bit more, but there's some really cool stuff, and we've invested in some of them too. Organized seed capital for things, and have actually participated in some of those liquidity events, and returned all that capital and then some of the money that we've ever invested in. Although that's not what the core model is, you can actually leverage access to lots of folks starting good stuff and relationships, and throw capital into them and get your money back.
Was Better Ventures started at the Hub?
Yes, yeah, we actually started a seed stage venture program here that the Hub initially ran one cohort with Village Capital, if people have ever heard of that group, and then the folks who ran the first one then kind of took it over, and now they're $20+ million seed stage venture fund working out of the Hub in Oakland on wherever that is. It's on the car dealership row there, Broadway. So people have started funds here. Impact Assets in 2010, we were here, and I think we had maybe $50 million of assets that we were administering in the donor advised fund space, and we've grown up to we're $500 million now that we're investing in these kinds of ventures, and the funds that invest in these kinds of ventures. So there's a whole. And that's actually structured as a nonprofit. So there's not it got sold, but it's growing up and really helping to popularize impact investing nationally in a cool way. And the Hub is, a part of supporting that.
And if you're interested in impact assets, I would add that Scott Nance can answer some of your questions. Scott, did you have a question or a comment here to add?
Actually, I had a question for Paula.
Yeah.
So, Paula, one of the things they teach us in the entrepreneurship program is the importance of having a competitive advantage. And obviously, the U of A is a first mover sort of in the social innovation education area. What is your aspiration for the school in terms of ultimate rankings in this space?
Well, I think we have the opportunity to really elevate ourselves in the rankings and the awareness. We want to be known as the school that is generating the leaders for the innovation economy or everything that's going on. In the same way that Wharton is known for finance, Kellogg is known for marketing, I would like the Eller College to be known for entrepreneurship and innovation. And I think doing partnerships like these and the other thing that we are doing, I think can position us, put us on the map.
Yes.
I have two questions. One is the program starting, and then also, I know Impact Hub is a B corporation. Are there any plans to leverage the B Corp network with the new partnership?
The second one I'll take. I'm not sure, but I'll defer the technical rollout timing, although I believe it's this fall, is to start with at least the beginnings of the courses and then it'll graduate into the full-flung master's program for 2019, starting in January. So that's the answer on that. And we'll have a whole sort of marketing communications lead up through that, so that hopefully we're getting to people from multiple sources, avenues. In terms of B Corp, actually B Corp just moved in here. They actually used to be members. They moved away when we switched building. I hear that they've committed to coming back in, so they'll be here starting next month. The actual certification company that is certifying the Patagonias of the world that are signing up to be B Corps, or the Etsy's of the world, or lots of small groups in Impact Hub itself. So I think that it's a really interesting model. It gets to sort of some of the earlier comments on, how do you pick apart and kind of create an understanding of what we're talking about when you're saying integrating values into entrepreneurship and ventures and companies, and B Corp and B certification, and bringing those companies in to be mentors, to be places where people can go and become, become employees in, to start new ventures with, et cetera, I think is a real opportunity. And I think having that kind of, structures that can build popular understanding and really validate the integration of values into the definition of what business is important. And that's why, I think they're up to thousands, 2,000 companies?
I think at least 20,000 companies have taken the B Impact assessment, which is a voluntary thing you can do for free.
You get a rating on 1 to 200 about how impact cool you are, right?
Right, and a couple thousand at least, if not something
are
like
actually
4,000 are certified B corporations,
including King Arthur Flour, Patagonia, and Etsy. So a couple publicly traded companies mixed in, but mostly they tend to be the few $1 million, all the ultra eco chocolate companies of the world, or the impact hubs of the world. But
the SVTs,
the SVTs of the world.
Yeah. Did that answer your question sufficiently about?
We're going to invite them to actually.
What's your idea?
What's my idea? Oh, well,
Or what do you think we should do?
Well, I think you should work with B Corp. I work for a B Corp in the North Bay, and I've participated in a lot of the programs and the networking and visiting other companies around the Bay Area that are certified B Corps, all through B Corp. So I love the experience of working for one and having something really clear to point to and say, like, yes, my company actually has values, has purpose beyond making money. And here, you can go to their website and read all about it, and here's our score, and this is what it looks like. So I think it's a really great network.
Yeah. Simplifying and giving people a toolkit that they can use to articulate to employees, to customers, that we actually are being intentional about having a soul. That doesn't mean we're not, going after making profit and competing in the marketplace, but we're actually going to define what this is for our employees and our customers, and rate our supply chain and capture the value. Figure out how to capture the value for it. And I think having B Lab, the actual certification company, based here, literally here, is going to only mean that it's going to be quite natural for us to figure out how to cross flow into these cohorts. And I hadn't mentioned that to you, but it's awesome, right? And people, I mean, you should check out, if you're interested, go to just Google B Corp, and you can see a little bit more of the technicals of it. But you literally put in your charter, in your operating agreement, depending on what kind of corporate structure you are, an affirmative statement that says we are going to shift, we're going to allow ourselves to shift to a stakeholders kind of value system, not just a shareholder one. And that's the same thing as saying we care about the community and the environment, and we're willing to make business decisions that value the things that are external to our just exact business that you see as an investor or even as an employee. And that's kind of, I think that's really at the core of what B Corp is, or B certification is saying we're willing to put that on the table, and everybody's going to then define it totally differently across a spectrum. Some people will be crazy audacious about what that means, and other people will be like, no, we're acknowledging that we live in an ecosystem that has, and when we do something, there are effects that happen from that cause.
When you guys came in the room, I'm just interested in a show of hands, how many of you had ever heard of the idea or something like the idea of impact entrepreneurship? Okay, so this is not new to most of you, but to a few of you it is. So I do think that there's a lot to discover here and a lot to suss out in terms of what all this means. Any other?
That's like just to go on that for just 1 second, is like a lot of the world is waking up to this, but they're waking up to it. We're waking up to it in a very pragmatic way. Like reinsurance companies are freaked out and talking about climate change, not because they're altruists or do-gooders or tree huggers, or that they're worried about their attracting and retaining millennial employees that actually do care about this stuff, but because of the insurance claim patterns that are going through the roof with all this, storm patterns and water rises and floodings, and that's why they care. So it doesn't have to be, there's not one answer, and I'm totally not into a hierarchy of virtue kind of thing. Like it's like, this is how we define what impact means and what you should do with it. It's like everybody's coming at this stuff from different kinds of directions, and I think that's really important to acknowledge too. Just using the hands in the room, it's like, like what? It's a lot of it's just practical. It's risk management. It's opportunity chasing. I mean, most of the alt energy, solar stuff. It's really just about wow, this is it's going to help out, but really it's about making a ton of money.
I think it's fair to say that when BlackRock is saying this is important, it's probably not because they
are philanthropists
are
suddenly.
being philanthropic suddenly in their business. It's because of the risk management and opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Me Too movement, like gender equity. I mean, it's just like risk management. If not, it's the right thing to do, and you can build authentic brands around.
Yeah, it's both. At the end of the day, it's both. And there's many of you who I'm sure have really interesting thoughts who haven't yet shared them with us. What are you thinking about this program? Yes.
A couple of questions actually. One is more technical. Is the old form of certificate not available for this program? That's the one that I took and I remember, and I think it's a little easier to engage people that are maybe already deep into their entrepreneurial action and want to get some little side education to help them get better faster. Is that available, especially through this program as well? Or
Great question.
When you say the old form of certificate,
I took it as a minor, 3
3 courses.
courses. It was lovely. It was pretty much with the tech launch and with the Desert Angels and all the people around there. It was pretty much the same environment here. But I didn't have to stop my PhD. I didn't have to stop working or anything like that. It was easy to fit in.
No,
Give me everything I needed.
Yeah, the idea here, you have the master's program, but we also have the offering of these certificates. So that will be available, because I think that's more appealing to people. Yeah.
And the certificate, as I understand it, the 3 credits that make up the certificate program are included in the master's, so that you can actually bring those in later and then build the master's over time.
It was professionals, either working at Raytheon or IBM or other companies. They just came for the certificate. They did not need a degree.
No, we'll be offering them here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second question is something that your last comment, and you, Michelle, is there a plan for this thing to go to areas of the country? And obviously, you got to be here, right? No doubt. This is where entrepreneurship is the hotbed of entrepreneurship. But going to, whole country, or I don't like the current approach of we're going to bring back coal jobs and smelters to fix the social problem there, and everybody says the future solution will be entrepreneurship in that area and bringing in new opportunities. Is there any plan for that, both from the school perspective or impact hub to go to those areas?
If the impact hub is there, we may want to go too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's not, you need, the Impact Hub, we're still trying to figure out our business model, honestly, 6 years into it. But there's a certain density of population that probably is an ingredient. So, I'm not sure we can go everywhere, but there's 16 of them open in the United States right now, and there was none when we opened this one a few years ago. And so there's I think, there's one in Salt Lake City, there's one in Baltimore, Maryland. There's, not just the big kind of obvious choices. And I think that, so we can replicate this experience after we beta test it here successfully, and we can immediately put it on in 20 other places by then. There'll be 20 open. But I also think there's lots of different environments that the UA can partner with, not just this. I mean, this is a good one. This would probably be interesting at a WeWork, or one of these other more mainstream. I mean, there's different kinds of little incubatory, co-worky places. I think that's a natural fit. It might, be less interesting on some level, but I think you can find ways to kind of go where you need to go with it. But you got to start somewhere.
Well, I'd also like to build on that. Is Andela coming to the U.S.? And would you explain what neighborhood economics is? And does that have anything to do with this program, or could it?
Are you coming to the U.S.?
Well, so the interesting thing about Andela is, so what we are first solving for is how do you take an employee, take engineering out of this and just take what Andela does, and instead of just giving them, putting them in the job and just expecting them to succeed, you give them all the tools on the side to do that. So we give them the learning, we build the curriculum, but we utilize Udacity courses, online courses that are available in mainstream. I think one of my favorite stories is there was so I told you the 3 countries we're in, it's Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda. But one of my developer friends now, he was originally from Togo. And in Togo, they speak French. So when you apply to Andela, your background really does not matter, but it's your technical proficiency and ability to succeed. And I think that's what's going to change about the global economy is you can be anywhere in the world, but if you are a go-getter, if you have that technical wit, you can exceed using the courses that are provided in the curriculum, but you have to be able to utilize those tools. So this developer in Togo, since he speaks French, he went to a Google cafe, and unfortunately, all the courses to learn coding were in English, and he spoke French. So he first taught himself how to speak English, and then he taught himself how to code, and now he's working with a company out here doing their mobile development. And originally it was a company called Connect, and now it's called Wonder. They're based down in SoCal. So in a way we are kind of in the US because we're connecting the dots, but at the same time what we're doing is creating the curriculum and the ecosystem of how do you support an individual as they scale through their career. And that is something that once we kind of work through Africa, which is we're opening new campuses all the time, where the idea is to really go global and continue to work our way. And to your point, why can't we be in the middle of, I don't know, Kansas, South Chicago? Exactly,
right.
Exactly.
I think, didn't the Samasource experiment, they played around with this too. They started off in developing emerging markets, and then they're like, why not bring it to rural America where there's all these women who are underemployed or out of work, and we can bring this piece, this sort of micro task. I can't remember exactly what they do, but they were pretty effective in prototype and kind of porting it into the U.S. So.
And I would add that if you want to hear what Samasource is doing, which is one of the best examples of this, in addition to what you're doing, and I'm excited that you're developing curriculum because Samasource will be presenting in Berkeley at the Global Social Venture Competition regional semifinals. That's next week on, I believe, Thursday, the 16th.
And I was just emailing with
Wednesday.
Layla, the founder of it, who's going to come here on April 19th. We're going to do a seed stage impact investing conference for 2 days here and at the Victoria Theater at the end of the block. And she's going to give I haven't figured out what she's going to do yet, but she's going to come and tell a story of what she's been doing. And that to your other question about like, what about really pushing the envelope in understanding like what neighborhood economics is or what seed stage ecosystems can be. We're really committed. The founders of this are also the founders of SOCAP, which is this really big conference that's been going on for 10 years. And we're committed. We're going to be doing a whole series of thematic deep dive events here, building on top of the community, which I think is also going to really be a great opportunity to cross flow on this program partnership. We're doing seed stage impact ecosystem, which is like entrepreneurs and funders and mentors and kind of what's the gap opportunity analysis and what can we do better. Conference in April. Early May, we're doing one on the regenerative economy, sort of taking the definition of sustainability to the next sort of forward-looking. Like we actually can't just stop doing harm to the world. We have to replant and change the whole kind of footprint of enterprise and industry and humanity on the planet. And we're also doing this neighborhood economics drill down, which is like, okay, let's take the Mission, for example, the Mission district that we're sitting in. But like, how do you really examine inclusive finance and access to capital and support of entrepreneurism in distressed communities in a local social contract? And we're going to use we want to do that around the country, including like let's go to coal country and do that. But we're doing it here just because we're here and it's a good place to start. And that's going to be in June, I think.
And it's also happening in North Carolina and in other places that are actually not far from coal country. So there's a lot to learn, and it would be great if you participated in those neighborhood economics gatherings, because some of the people who are really at the forefront of taking some of the innovation from the San Francisco Bay Area, but really listening, and who have frankly been humbled, I think, by trying to mix social value creation with entrepreneurship, coming from a very successful conventional background, and learning that that's not just directly transportable into social problem solving, but there is something to learn and know about that. Some of the very best experience and knowledge about that is here. There is an opportunity, I think, to translate that into curriculum content that can then be taught, and that innovation laboratory is really very much here, and what you guys are doing as well. I would just want to give props to Tim and his colleagues. All right, I think I'd like to just go through our panelists and ask if you have any parting thoughts about what you hope this program accomplishes, or how what you would advise or what you would ask of the audience. Any of those things, and we'll go from right to left here. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think my thoughts as I was listening to everybody is that the power of the entrepreneurship program and curriculum gives almost a safety net and training wheels to anyone who's interested in being entrepreneurial. And I think my theme is that you don't have to start a company to be entrepreneurial, but you can use that same characteristics instead of using the theory you're taught in practice. And so that's like what I really found most powerful here. So you can, like, it's almost like taking a power booster while starting your own company or learning your own thoughts and doing it with the guidance of mentors. And I just remember we'd take all of our business plan ideas and we'd work with our team, and then we'd take it to our mentor and then be like, this was a good try, but let's actually do this correctly and let's execute it, and here's where your gaps are and where you need to improve. And all of a sudden you have an advantage against the competitive advantage that we talked about earlier against all the other people, because you have this extra knowledge along with your natural intuition. So I think that's what this program can really accomplish for anyone looking to be entrepreneurial at whatever level that means.
I think this is an extremely exciting partnership. I haven't seen anything like this before, and I think bringing academics and all the strength that we have and partner with Impact Hub is something that I'm very confident it will succeed. We have to have that first batch of students in to create success,
But the other thing I'd like to comment on after listening to Tim and Sarah about measuring impact and all these things, I started to put my research hat, right? As an academic, we do research. We could look at this as a live lab for really testing hypotheses about what works, what doesn't work, what we can measure. And I think that can then feed back into the education that we provide. So I hadn't thought about that before, but if you're open to partner with us in that dimension, I think that there's a huge potential there.
I strongly believe that everything is out of reach unless you try. And so if you're unhappy in your job, you've always wanted to start a company, and the hardest part of entrepreneurship is just starting. Whatever it is, to that leap to quit your job, to quit your academic work, to just dive right in. That's the hardest part. It's all easier from there. Doesn't mean it's easy, but that is the
as easy as falling off a cliff.
Exactly, but that's the hardest part. And so I think that ideally, someone asked the question, like, what are your success stories, right? And so everyone asks that. Everyone asks, like, what are the Eller success stories? What are the entrepreneurship program success stories? And so I think my challenge to this audience is, what success stories can come from this room? What success stories can come from this program? And how do we get, points on the board relative? And you have to start somewhere. And if you don't start, then you never will.
Yeah, and I think getting this, I guess the first cohort of hopefully 25 won't be until January. I think there will be a little bit more kind of, but to really ask people to, and maybe as you follow up with attendees here and people to activate your spheres of influence and find those, if everybody in this room found one person or participated in it directly, that would be the first cohort. And if this is as magical as it's obviously going to be, that'll be the end of that. Then it'll just be, installed as a success, and we'll just keep proliferating it and doing it. So I think that's my charge to myself, is like, who's that? I don't need to find 25 people. We've got like a few months to find one person each, 25 of us, and I'll take two, just to double down. But I really do believe, and I love what you're saying, Paulo. It's like having access to and being kind of ensconced in a multi-hundred person or multi-hundred entrepreneur, system that we can tap and bring in, and that we can go to school on, and also be practicum, be experientially learning with. I think that's really a great asset. And then the fact that there's the Games That Give, the Scoots, the ones that have graduated and moved on, and the alumni network, bring them in, and then you bring the actual alumni network of UA in the Bay Area extended and bring them in. That is some pretty awesome sauce, right? When it comes to not just like, oh yeah, I'm going to school, I'm going to get my class, after work, I'm going to pick up this credit so that I can get a master's degree. So I think that's what I'm most excited about, and I think that we do have an opportunity to really create a lab environment, a practicum experiential environment that leverages those assets into the experience of the next 25 leaders who are going to start the next 25 awesome companies, whether they be impact or not. Everything, as Jed Emerson, my friend, says, that Sarah knows well, everything has an impact. You can just decide to measure or understand it or not, but everything has positive and negative environmental and social impacts in the world. Every single company. Do you want to leverage that? Do you want to deny that? Do you want to whatever that? Like, that's your decision. But you can't. You are an impact entrepreneur. You are an impactful company because you have a supply chain, and you have employees, and you have customers, and you're making stuff.
Yep. Well said. With that, if folks in the room want to be in dialogue with the program, who should they talk with? Who's in the room here? Should they talk to you, Remy? Okay. And where are the drinks? Okay.
The wonderful thank you, Kate. What, downstairs?
Yeah, that brings us to the end of the panel. So let's give a round of applause to our amazing panelists here.